Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Manly Pinterest Tips Show. I'm here. I'm so excited to be with you guys today. We've got a great show in store of you. And if you would, share this out to all your social networks on the interwebs, and we will get started. Um, as I mentioned earlier, I'm Jeff Sieh, and you're not. And welcome to the show. Are you wondering why your blog posts aren't getting more traffic? Are you frustrated with spending all that time creating content only to see it disappear in the news feed after a couple hours? Do you want a greater return on investment on your marketing efforts? Well, if that's so, then today's show is for you. But first, have you downloaded the free Manly Pinterest Tips Tackle Box? It's full of some of my favorite resources for creating images and productivity. Go to manlypinteresttips.com to check it out. Now, I'm very excited for our guest today. I have been following Ana probably since I started on social. She really, her blog posts and her social posts have really helped me get a grasp on what I needed to do to grow my presence on social media and as a blogger. And so if you don't know Ana, here is the skinny. Ana Hoffman never thought internet marketing would be her career of choice, but when she got her head around SEO, she knew she had found her passion. That passion became the centerpiece of her popular blog, Traffic Generation Cafe, where she brings together the most profit-pulling traffic generation tips, hacks, and resources. Ana, thanks so much for being on the show today.
I'm so thrilled, Jeff. And that comment aside, that made me feel really very old because I do feel like a dinosaur in blogging. People tell me, I've been following you since I started. And I'm like, really? I've been on there for that long?
Well, I mean, this dates me as well, but I think I started following you over on Google Plus, and that's where, we had a lot of us came from. We had, like Mike Alton, who's watching today. Thanks, Mike. And Shannon Hernandez, who's here. So, we kind of had this group that we were, it was, Google Plus was a good thing. It's kind of sad of what it happened. But anyway, yeah, we've been around for a while, but you really have helped me a lot with, especially your SEO and your blogging tips. And I'm really excited to share you with my audience here and on the podcast as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So as I'm talking with Ana today, if you have any questions who are watching live, either on Facebook or Periscope, head over to Crowdcast because that's where I can see your questions, and I'll try to ask them to Ana during the show. Just ask those over in the sidebar. But Ana, I wanted to kind of break down and ask how long, have you always been a blogger? How did you wind up where you are now?
Actually, I think the first time I heard of a friend of mine who was blogging, I thought, what a waste of time.
Yeah.
I truly did. It took me quite a while. Even after I started blogging already, it took me a while to actually get the point of it. Because I'm one of those skeptical people who did not believe that you just blog and everybody will read it. I kept thinking, well, why would they want to read what I have to say? And that's actually how Traffic Generation Cafe was born, because turns out I was right. People did not want to just come and read because nobody knew you were there. So I had to figure out ways to actually bring people to my blog. And as I was learning marketing for the first time, I figured out there was no resource there that was good enough for me to learn everything I needed to know in a very accessible way. Because, I'm a very simple thinker. You just give me bullet points. That's how I work. I don't need long, extended blog posts about anything. So that's what I started doing at Traffic Generation Cafe. And it kind of hit the spot with a lot of people. So that's pretty much how I got hooked on blogging.
Very cool. Now I was going to ask you, one of the things that you were really popular on Google Plus, you would do the weekly marketing skinny.
Yes.
Are you still doing that? I kind of tried to find some of them to share, but I didn't see. Are you kind of taking hiatus now? I totally understand it because I've done the same thing before.
Yes, I had to.
Okay.
About 6 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, I decided to create my first course, actually.
Cool.
And that kind of made me take a break from a lot of different things, including weekly marketing skinnies, and I miss them terribly because I truly feel like I'm the last one to know everything, and I hate the feeling. So as soon as I get my head wrapped around the course, finished, I'm planning on getting back into it.
Very cool. Because that was, I mean, we would wait for those and read those. And Denise Wakeman, I was listening to her, and she was talking about you, and that was one of her favorite things as well. And Denise is also one of those Google Plus people that we had a lot of fun with over there. So today is going to be about repurposing, which I love, and I kind of do the repurposing of images. That's kind of what I've spoken about and talked about a lot with Pinterest and Instagram and all that stuff. But we're really talking today about repurposing content. And so I want to kind of get really basic for people who may be totally new to social media or blogging. So what is content repurposing? How would you explain that to somebody?
Well, fundamentally, content is information, right? And we all know that people consume information in many different ways: videos, visuals, podcasts. Different people like different things. And also they go looking for information at different places. Unfortunately, nobody comes to your website. Look, let's take me, because when I say you know.
Right.
So let's take me, as much as I would love to be the Google of traffic generation, and that's actually my purpose eventually, but eventually it may take the rest of my life, who knows, or the rest of my blogging career at the very least. So I would like to be that, but I'm not. Most people will go to Google, they will go to YouTube, they will go to other websites that they are currently on, LinkedIn, SlideShare, Facebook, whatever it is, and search for information there. And it is my goal to be found for whatever it is that they're searching for pertaining to my niche. And that's exactly what content repurposing achieves. It allows your content to be out there where people are actually searching for it, because sitting on your blog, it's not doing you any good, because obviously the problem here is that you need to go out there, get people and bring them back in. But how would you entice them to come back to you, right? Because why would they? They're very comfortable where they are right now. And, dangling a carrot in front of them doesn't always work. So I kind of equate content repurposing to giving out samples, right? For instance, if you are a chocolatier that produces wonderful chocolate, but people just go buy Godiva Safeway, why would they want to try your chocolate? So you stand out there on the street with samples of chocolate. And now that people have tried what you've got, and they definitely want more, that's when your store gets busy. And that's what content repurposing does. You package your content in those little tiny samples in a way people want to consume images or videos, as I mentioned already. And that's the carrot you're dangling in front of them. And then attach a call to action at the end that basically is a cliffhanger. It makes them, imagine a movie trailer. If a movie trailer is when done, it wants you to see the movie. And the movie could be not all that great after you watched it, but the trailer is incredible. So that's your point, is to create the trailer with your content that people would want to come and get more of on your site.
Awesome. You brought up chocolatier, and one of my clients is Sweet Shop USA, which is one of the biggest handmade chocolatiers in the country, not very far from me. What they did, they just made the world's largest truffle, and got with Guinness Book of World Records. But then what they did, and I thought this ties into repurposing, they chopped it up and sold little pieces of it to people, or gave it away with, that they won this thing. Well, then that got picked up by social media, that got picked up by the news. And so by going out there, if they just would have said that and not announced it anywhere, nobody would have known about them. But because they had all these other things, and then giving out little pieces of the repurposed truffle that they had made. That just made me think of it when you were talking about that, because it was great how it worked.
It exactly that. And then even producing the largest truffle to get into the Guinness Book of Records is repurposing of some way. They take this skill, they take what they've got, the product, and make something that stands out from the crowd. And in the end, that's how they got out there. I love that story.
So you've told us why we should repurpose our content. So where? I mean, and I think I know the answer you're going to say, but I want to hear you say it. Well, where should we repurpose our content?
Okay, so let me take a step back. When I repurpose content, I'm very deliberate about how I do it. And so I want to talk about the process a little bit, just to make you understand where you can repurpose the content that you produce. Essentially, my content repurposing system is like a bunch of Legos that you can construct anything with. They're just blocks. And most of those blocks are actual images. And hopefully most of them are self-contained images, meaning that you can take any one of those images, or at least the vast majority of those images, and post them as a standalone message, and they make sense. So those Legos are the images. And then once you have those images, you can make anything you want to with those images. You can, again, repurpose them on social media as standalone images. You can, and you should definitely, put them back in your blog posts. Use them as a featured image, speckle them throughout the blog post to make them more interesting and more engaging. Then you can take the same images and you can turn them into a YouTube video or any kind of video. You can share them as your Instagram story, or, well, I should say Facebook story, because Instagram does not allow you to upload images for your story. But you can use them anywhere you want to. And then imagine those images as a string that you put together in a video, and you read the script out loud as you record your video, and then you can strip the script, the audio from the script, and now you have an audio track that you can post at SoundCloud or at various podcast sites. So again, you can see how those little pieces of Legos, they can just fit in anywhere you want to. So to answer your question and to go back to it, there are different ways of doing it, but if you have an established presence, like you, for instance, Jeff, Pinterest obviously would be a good choice for you. You can reuse those images on Pinterest where you already have fans, and that just increases the flow and increases the recognition and increases your branding. So you can then take the same images onto any other platform that you're active on, probably Facebook and Twitter. You can do it that way. If you obviously do a lot of things with YouTube, so you can definitely repurpose those images on YouTube. So start with where you are at already. If you have an established presence, there's no reason to, reinvent the wheel. Just go with what you have. Now, if you don't have anything already established, probably the best recommendation for me is follow two leads here. Figure out where your audience is. And the easiest way to do it, see where your competitors hang out the most, because that usually means that's where the audience is. So you want to be on those platforms as well. But also, you kind of have to like the platform. For instance, a lot of people don't get Twitter, and that's okay. You don't have to be there per se. If you're just like, oh, I don't get it, I don't understand it, that's okay. The only pushback that will give you is, even if you think you're not a video person, I really want you to be on YouTube, because YouTube is like a universe, search engine of its own. And to be found there is incredibly useful. And the way I do my videos, they take any kind of fear out of video production, because you don't have to be on screen. You just have to read well enough.
Right.
I assume most of us can do that. And it can be very short too, so you don't have to be too scared about video production. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think some of the tools like the new Adobe Spark, where you can read and capture video and kind of have screen shares, which I'm assuming you're talking about, is a great way to kind of get your feet wet with doing video and uploading it to YouTube. So let's, I know you've talked about this in the past, but let's say I've been blogging for a while and I have a bunch of blog posts that I can repurpose. So where do I start? Do I have to go back and make sure, update them all to be evergreen? What kind of gives a good post to start this repurposing process?
Well, start with the least friction point. You don't want this to be more of a project than it already is, because let's face it, you're going to be learning a skill. The reason why most people do not repurpose is not because they don't hear all the time that that's a good thing. They're just too intimidated by it because they don't have the skills. that they need to do it. But if you think about it, if you just take it one little step at a time, it really makes a lot of sense. So to start, you need to pick a post that is already ready to go. And the one consideration that I always tell my students to think about is what makes the best content to be repurposed. That's the content that solves your prospect's problem. One problem, one piece of content, one audience. If you have a blog post in mind that does those things, that's perfect. And usually, you mentioned evergreen content. That's what you're usually shooting for, because whatever you were repurposing, you want it to have a long shelf life, right? If you're putting effort into it, you might as well. So look for something that's already evergreen. So if it needs a little bit of updating, that's fine. But if it's already good to go, let's say you wrote it a month ago, what could have possibly happened in a month, right?
Right.
That's better. So look for things like how to posts, because essentially how to posts are evergreen, and essentially they solve one specific problem, right? So if you have bullet lists, those were great for repurposing. And the reason for that is because let's say you have 10 ways to do something, 10 ways to make chocolate. I don't know what, because I ate a bunch of chocolate this morning. It's coffee chocolate.
Yeah.
I can still taste it in my mouth. Oh, it's so good. But anyway, so let's say you have, a blog post, 10 ways to make the best chocolate ever. Don't repurpose. Don't make images for 10 ways. Make images for 5 ways. And then tell them, if you want more, I've got more where this came from. And that's your call to action. So again, as you're repurposing any content, think of a reason to bring people back to your website. If you don't have a reason, if you don't have your call to action lined up, don't repurpose. Start with that first, because that's where I see people getting lost all the time. They think, oh, that speaks to me. I want to repurpose that post. And then at the end of creating whatever it is that they're creating, they run out of steam. They don't know how to connect a call to action. And either it's not there at all, or it's forced. It doesn't go with the flow. So first, imagine the call to action, and then create your images to match the call to action.
Very cool. And we're going to dive into call to action in a minute. I wanted to point out, Colleen in the chat says, all this chocolate talk, I went and got a truffle out of the fridge to have with my afternoon tea. There you go. So we need to have a chocolate break in the middle of this, but we'll push forward. We'll push forward. So here's the big elephant in the room, I think, for people who are watching and maybe on social media or just getting started and have a small business. They struggle with the time just to create new content. And now we're adding, repurposing to their their workflow. So how do you find time to repurpose? I mean, I think that was a big question a lot of people have.
Very legitimate. And the mistake that people make, they think that they need to continue creating content while also repurposing what they have. And that's so not true. You need to stop creating new content, because chances are you've created a lot of it already, and it's just sitting there rotting in your archives. You need to dig it out, and you need to make it work. Because if you think about it, the most time-consuming, the most stressful thing about creating content is coming up with a good idea and developing that idea so that it hits the readers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, content repurposing takes that out. You already have an idea. You already went through all the stages. So it's almost, when I say brainless, you know what I mean. Right. You're just working with what you've got. So it's so much easier to repurpose what you have. Again, don't create any new content. Just focus on repurposing and focus on getting the content out there, because that's the purpose of repurposed content, right? Being out there. And just my personal story, and that's how I knew when I got hooked on content repurposing, it worked wonders. So about 3 years ago, I continued hearing about SlideShare, right? Everybody talked about SlideShare. And I think even Jay Baer wrote a post once where he basically said SlideShare is the sleeping giant of content marketing, yet only about 15% of content marketers actually use it. And that kind of struck the chord. And I'm thinking, well, I'm all into traffic generation, and apparently I am ignoring this giant of content marketing. I've got to try what it is, right? But again, it does take time, new skill, you have to master it. So I stopped writing for about a month to 2 months. I stopped writing anything at Traffic Generation Cafe, just as an experiment, right? All I did is I took a bunch of older blog posts and I just repurposed them as SlideShare presentations. I started with one, of course, and just to see how it goes, because I've never used PowerPoint before. That's what I used for the presentation. I've never created images. I was never, as I think I mentioned this before, I'm a bullet point person. I just need to have written text in front of me. I grab it with my brain and I can run with that. But most people are not like me, it turns out. Right?
Right.
So they accept things, they perceive things, they digest things a lot better if you put it in an image, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get that. So that's why I was struggling in the very beginning, because I had to readjust my brain and how it works to how people think that are not like me at all in any way, in the way they think. So again, it was a challenge, but it's not really that bad. If you I went back to my first presentation, and usually when you go back to your first blog post, you're like,
Yeah.
I ended up deleting a lot of my first blog posts because I never wanted anyone to find me. To find them, it was too embarrassing.
Right.
So, but the first presentation wasn't bad at all. I actually still love it. I mean, sure, I can tweak it a little bit, but it's still great. So again, going back to the story of SlideShare, I created 9 presentations in 30 days. And most of the times, I just sat in front of TV at night next to my husband, who loves to watch whatever shows. He loves football. He loves all kinds of things that I have, not much interest in. But I love sitting next to him. So that's what I would do. I would sit next to him and just, sit on my computer and create presentations. So I've published 9 presentations in 30 days. And in 30 days, I never been on SlideShare before. Nobody ever knew of me on SlideShare. So it's not like you can say, well, of course you're Ana Hoffman. Of course you got great results. No, started from scratch like everybody else would. 243,000 views in 30 days. Completely brand new to SlideShare, PowerPoint. Tell me, is your content getting that kind of traction just sitting on your blog? That's the point. It doesn't. So why are you creating more of it? It makes no sense. And that's why content repurposing makes so much sense. It's more effective. It takes less time. And the results that you're getting by far will outrun anything that you're doing so far. So it's absolute must. I don't know how else to tell you guys.
I know Peg Fitzpatrick is always she's killed it on SlideShare as well. The funny thing is, I didn't get to see your presentation live at Social Media Marketing World, but I did listen to the replay, and I knew you were a big fan of SlideShare from reading that. And one of the examples you used in there was Leslie Samuel. Well, this morning I went to SlideShare just to look, and his is still featured on the front page of SlideShare. So he's getting tons of traffic from that. So I think that's very, very cool that even I don't know how many months away was Social Media Marketing World, but it's still there. And so it's very, very cool. I think you're right, and Jay's right about it being a sleeping giant. And I really need to because I've got videos, I've got presentations and stuff that you had mentioned that are just sitting there that I really need to go and put there, because especially for visual stuff, I think it's very, very cool. So,
and if I may, before I forget, there's another huge benefit to repurposing content, and especially SlideShare as well, and that's search engine traffic. Because chances are, right now, your content is not getting much traction with Google, because there are a lot of big boys and girls out there who are taking up the first page. But if you think about it, who are those big boys and girls? A lot of them are YouTube videos and actually SlideShare presentations as well, because SlideShare gets about close to 80% of its traffic from search engines. And I have a few of my presentations that are ranked on the first page of Google, something that my blog may have or may have not ever done on its own, but SlideShare has so much more authority, unfortunately, than Traffic Generation Cafe, facing the facts here.
Mm-hmm.
So it has a much easier time ranking for just about anything. So you get more search engine traffic, and you build links that you always need to rank your own stuff eventually, right? All of that is done without absolutely any extra effort on your part, just by posting content at different places. Not only you get to bring traffic back to your site, but also you get to bring create domain authority that you need to be ranked on Google. So just an extra little tiny benefit as search engine traffic.
Yeah, that's great, because that is, everybody's trying to do that, and staying as a white hat or whatever. So you mentioned earlier the importance of a good call to action. Can you explain, for people who may not know what that is, and then what makes a good call to action in your opinion? Because your presentation, you really broke it down at Social Media Marketing World, and I really loved the way you were doing that, and especially on SlideShare, some of the examples there. So can you take a few minutes and explain what a good call to action is?
Exactly, and I kind of want to mention cliffhanger. That's probably the best way you can think of a call to action. When you create, let's go back to SlideShare presentation, because that's, I strongly feel that everybody should start with that. So when you create a presentation, your job is to solve your prospect's problem, but also in such a way that you give them a reason to want more. So for instance, I once was given a challenge. Somebody wrote me and said, yeah, all content can be repurposed, every niche, whatever. No, that's not true, he said, because there are plenty of niches out there that cannot. So I took a toilet plunger as an example, and on the spot, I came up with like 10 ideas of how I can sell this toilet plunger that made it fun and interesting through creating a SlideShare presentation. And literally, you just can have so much fun with that. And at the end, what's your call to action? You're selling toilet plungers. You say, if you want the best toilet plunger that will do all those things that I just talked about, this is the link for you. So again, your call to action is the additional benefit that the prospect absolutely needs. And so does your business. And that's sort of a bridge that forms the bridge from your repurposed content back to your site. But it doesn't end there, because now they came to your site, you need to have another call to action to actually convert the traffic into leads. And that's another thing that a lot of business owners, content creators do not do. They just bring traffic, and they all want traffic. And I tell them, I'm not going to tell you how to create traffic until you can show me that you can convert that traffic, because otherwise, what's the point? So wherever you're driving traffic to, that should have its own call to action as well, with even more benefit. So call to action, again, is just the bridge, or several bridges, several steps to get your prospect from barely knowing anything about you to, oh, I like what he or she has to say, to, I can't live without what he or she has to sell. That's basically what call to action is meant to do.
And you used an example that I thought was great. You almost did like a 1-2 punch, and this was specifically for SlideShare, where you would have, click here for more information, or click here to download my free guide on repurposing. And then they would click they would hit the next slide, and it would be arrows pointing at it. It would be like a 1-2 punch. Like if you missed it, oh, by the way, this is a link that you can click. Genius on SlideShare. So
it's very psychological, because even when people get to the end, they always think, what if it's not the end? That's one of the reasons people sit in a movie theater through closing captions, because they get thinking, some of those movies put some fun outtakes at the end.
Right.
They sit there and wait. So with SlideShare, or with YouTube video, the same kind of thing. They keep waiting. Is there something more? So they click. And if you click enough, it will get you to the next presentation or whatever comes next. You don't want that. You want them to give them time to make that decision. You want them to linger at the end and really think about the call to action. Like for instance, YouTube videos. I don't know if you do that, Jeff, but I usually at the end linger with my call to action for about 10 seconds and give them time to actually click on the link, because a lot of people just show the call to action and that's it. Right. So if I take more than 2 seconds to, do I want to, do I have time? It's gone, that's it. So linger at the end. And with SlideShare, that's what it does. Create, even could be 3 slides at the end where you linger, and each step takes them to a step further to make a decision to click on the link.
I think that's genius. That's a genius tactic right there. So here's the, what are some tactics to make your repurposed content findable? I mean, you gave some for SlideShare. You used to be able to take SlideShare and embed it into Pinterest pin, and you could actually go through the slides. They've changed that now, which is really hacks me off. But what are some ways that to make your repurposed content findable? And I also want to talk to you about what about the frequency, because there's all this talk about algorithms and to post less because that helps the algorithm. If you post too much, if you're putting stuff on Twitter to auto do it, auto tweet your content, it doesn't work as well. And so what are your thoughts on, frequency of repurposing, and also the how to make it findable on these networks?
I think people are way too concerned about algorithms, because at the end, they're not the ones who are paying the bills. It's the people who are using those platforms. So forget about frequencies, forget about anything else. That's what I do. You just provide value. That's what your job is. The rest will be taken care of itself. That's, if you think about back to search engine, I know it's a little bit off the beaten track here, but if you think about why a search engine was born, the idea behind, let's say, Google was to connect the consumer, the searcher, with the best possible information on the topic. It wasn't about how can I get to the first page to be the best possible source. You just created the best possible source, right? So that's what I urge you to do. Search engine traffic, to me, is always a bonus, not ever the goal, right? Because it's just a byproduct, really, of content repurposing. So take your time with content repurposing. There's no time frame. It might take you, a week just to get through creating one presentation, not because it takes long, but because you don't know what you're doing, or because you don't have that much time. Whatever it is, don't worry about it. Just do the best job that you can, because I think quality has much more reflection on the kind of traffic and how much traffic you will get in the end than the quantity of produced content, right? And speaking of being findable, as we've talked about, there's no, you have to kind of do a light keyword research of some sort, because remember I mentioned you need to provide solutions to your target market, but to provide a solution, you still need to know what problems they have. And you would think, as website owners that blog about in a certain niche or produce products, whatever it is that we're producing, we should know what our customers want. Most of the times we actually don't, because things change. Even if we knew yesterday, today our consumer might want something completely different that looks differently and it sounds different, So you have to do an ongoing research into what it is that your consumer wants and what questions they're asking, because a question essentially is a keyword that your target prospect is looking up. That's your cue. That's the problem that they have. And a lot of people don't like the word problem. Call it whatever you want. You know, the prospect could be bored or tired or whatever it is. Maybe she wants a cat video just because she's bored, you know, but she's searching for it, right? So that's her current problem. So it's your job to show up there in the search, which she's looking for the solution to the problem, and be that solution. And keywords, the questions that your audience is asking, you absolutely need to know. There are a couple of easy ways to do it, and I'll give you 2 easy ways. One of them is answerthepublic.com. It's a wonderful free tool that basically takes Google autocomplete suggestions and adds a few stop words to them, because, you know, a lot of us form questions differently. So, but what that does, algorithmically produces a lot of variations of different questions that people are currently asking on Google specifically. Again, free tool, fun to use. Don't spend too much time doing it, just enough to have an idea of what it is people want from you. So, and then another tool that I just found, turned out that BuzzSumo and Henley Wing actually sent me an email, and he asked me to check it out. Let me just see for a second. I don't want to be wrong. It's called Bloomberry, bloomberry.com. And
how do you spell that?
Hold on, I'm just, yeah, like blooming flower, BLUUM, berry, BERRY. So, and it's absolutely free tool at the moment, created by BuzzSumo, so you know quality is behind that. And all it does is it searches through questions. You give it a keyword, like I would go and say website traffic, right? And it just gives me a bunch of questions that people are currently asking all over the web, whether it's Quora or Reddit, you know, different forums, wherever it is, just gives me the questions. And that's perfect because it's like a gold mine of repurposed content, you know. Just answer those questions and put it all over. And once you start answering people's questions, they'll be finding you. You don't even have to worry about it, you know. So again, you have to know what it is that they're searching to be found.
Very cool. Thanks for those resources. I'm very excited to check them out. That's awesome. How can you pick good images? I mean, because you talked about SlideShare and some of the other platforms are really big on images, and you and your presentation at Social Media Marketing World talked about creating an emotional connection as you're doing this repurposed content. So how do you pick good images for repurposing, and, you know, do you have any best practices for that?
I think what was for me anyway, it took a little bit of practice. You can't just, it just does take practice. So in order to do that, you have to, usually when I create a presentation, I take my time with it. It's like forming an idea. I let it brew in my head a little bit, you know, and I think, for instance, one of the presentations that it did very well on SlideShare, it was about SlideShare, and it's called How to Milk SlideShare for All the Traffic It's Worth. It took me a while to come up with a title, but once I thought of the word milk, has nothing to do with SlideShare. You probably saw that one. Milk and cows just came to mind. And all of a sudden, this whole presentation is about cows, just funny images about cows. Again, it's not an emotional connection per se, but it's funny and it's memorable, and that's what forms an emotional connection, because people like to have fun when they learn anything, obviously. That's why that presentation did so well. So the point here is that the inspiration for your images, for the theme for your presentation, can pretty much come from anywhere. But start with yourself, you know. So you have a title for your for the repurposed content, for the presentation that you're creating. Kind of think about it and think, what kind of image comes to mind when I think of whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. So start there. Worst comes to worst and nothing comes to mind, which happens all the time, head over to some image websites. I'll give you 2 of my favorites. One of them is pixabay.com. It's Pixabay. It's an absolutely free website. really good quality. And when I say free, it means that you can use them without attribution, which is really what you want, because there's nothing, worse than just having that little link,
Right.
Creative Commons attribution. Oh, it takes away from anything that you create. And plus, it's a liability no matter how you look at it. So
Right.
find websites that have definitely free to use images without any attribution, and Pixabay is one of them. And just type in whatever keyword that matches, the direction of your repurposed content, and just see what comes to mind. Just see what kind of images pop up, and see if anything becomes an inspiration for your presentation. Now, not every slide has to have an image, right? So don't, again, as I said already, go the least frictionable path.
Right. That's good. That's good.
Right. Make sure that you put the least amount of effort for the biggest bang, right? For the biggest return.
Mm-hmm.
So don't try to, add an image to every slide, just the most important ones. And those are the ones that can stand alone as messages on their own. That's the important part. And with those images, you also want to make sure that you add the link to your content as well, as sort of an additional mini call to action. Because if you repurpose an image on, I don't know, Instagram, for instance, and it has no link whatsoever on it, not that people would want to really tap up the link, but sometimes they would if they're really interested in learning more. So you want at least to have the link there, and for branding as well, add your logo or whatever it is that makes people recognize that this came from you. Those standalone images have to have that. So, let's say your presentation has 20 slides in it. If 5 of them are solid standalone images that kind of take people through the story, that's great. Imagine I take those, here's a repurposed content kind of thing. You post those 5 images on Twitter as separate tweets, and then you create Twitter moment out of it and share that. So all of a sudden, you literally take what you've repurposed, then repurposed on Twitter, then repurposed into Twitter moments. Then you can actually embed that in a blog post on your site. So you just create kind of a chain reaction. I mean, if I think about repurposing possibilities, they're endless. I don't think I've actually tapped into the full potential yet, because the possibilities keep popping in my mind. But just remember that, create your end product should be able to brand you as an expert, provide solution, and you should be able to put it into multiple locations, into multiple platforms. So
Very cool. So now that you've kind of walked us through repurposing, do you now write your blog post to look ahead and is there steps that you use to help when it repurpose, because you're going to repurpose this blog post that you're writing right now, to make that easier when it's finally published? Do you have steps in place kind of, okay, I'm not going to use this image for my, header graphic for my blog, but I know that image will do great when I do a slideshare of that? Do you kind of try to think ahead in that way?
It got so bad for me that I almost have to create a SlideShare presentation before I write the blog post, because once you get it, once you get the connection between images and how your mind kind of flows in that direction,
Mm-hmm.
you will never be able to write another post without content repurposing in mind. And that makes future content production so much easier. I'll tell you, it takes me a lot less time now to write a blog post, because I start with an outline, and then I add just very elementary pieces to that outline. Because if you think about it, SlideShare is very, very simple text.
Mhm.
And believe it or not, that's what the readers on your blog want as well. Nobody wants to read War and Peace on your blog, and yet, for some reason, 10,000 word blog posts have become so popular. But the problem is that they generate a lot of social media presence and buzz, but they don't, generally speaking, generate that much traffic because nobody wants to come to the blog and read 10,000 words on a topic. They want to come to your blog and read something very specific that solves their problem. They want to be in and out. That's why they'll come back, not because you write those extra long, epic blog posts. So, back to where I started. When you start with an outline, with simple words, simple text, and kind of repurpose it even in your mind as you write it, it makes everything easier because it's sort of like you have a skeleton and it's so much easier to put stuff over it. You know, if you have a house, it's much easier to put furniture in it versus you buy furniture, you don't have a house yet, right?
Right.
Kind of silly analogy, but still it works. So it just makes my content creation a breeze. And I already have built-in um, built-in foundation, cornerstone for future repurposing. So absolutely, it's great for future content creation.
So, because I mean, I do the same thing when I do a presentation like social media marketing world. I usually start, like you said, with an outline and then kind of uh, and make my slides and then fill in the content of what I'm going to say. And Colleen said about your word, she goes, "Ain't nobody got time to read 10K words." So I think that's funny.
So
Yeah.
at the end, you don't serve your audience. You just social media baiting, and that's fine every once in a while. But you really need to serve the audience. That's the only way you're going to win this game.
Hmm. So here's the other question I know a lot of people ask, and there's a worry, and I think it's blown out of proportion, but you know, duplicate content. Google will delist you from the listings if they find out you're doing duplicate content. So what are your thoughts about this? Because I know it kind of touches on repurposing, even though I think we're changing it up so much it really doesn't matter. But just speak to that really quick, because I know probably some people have some concerns.
Starting back in 2008, since 2008, continuously, Google keeps saying there's no such a thing as duplicate content penalty, and nobody ever believes them. But it's true. If you think about it, it's very true. So duplicate content is when you take two pieces of identical content that can be accessed online, anywhere online, through different URLs. It could be within your website, because if you think about it, you have tags, you have categories, and basically the same content, the same blog posts go on different shelves, and you can access them through all those different shelves. So you have duplicate content on your blog already. That's normal. Google understands that. They would like for you to minimize that if possible, but it's very natural. And then another form of duplicate content is actually content syndication. It's not content repurposing. And that's when you take your content in its entirety and you publish it elsewhere, republish it elsewhere. And that's fine too. Once again, Google understands that that's completely normal, unless you're doing it to spam. Then Google will take note of that. So I think that you would have to do quite a bit of duplication, like, just auto republishing articles and all of that. That's, none of you are doing it, I'm sure. So duplicate content is not a penalty, is not an issue. And another thing that I always stress, people are so afraid of Google and what it might do. The truth is, chances are your site is getting so little search engine traffic as is. What are you afraid of? Really, you need to go out there and generate traffic proactively, right? Forget about Google. Do what's right for your readers. And that's what Google wants. They want you to do right by your users, and that's what they reward. So forget about the issue, again, non-existent. and it doesn't matter for the most part.
Very cool. So we're coming down to our last two questions, and one of the ones I'd love you to answer is there any like all-time favorite tool you use for repurposing that you can't live without? And you can't say SlideShare. You gotta say something else.
Well, SlideShare is not a tool; it's a
I know,
really. But you know, I've tried so many different tools, and yes, I've been dabbling with Adobe Spark as well. Some of them are better than others, but honestly, I keep coming back to my Keynote or PowerPoint. That's the tool that I cannot live without, because that's the only one I can rely on, because tools change, browsers change, there are all kinds of bugs in all of them, and I don't have the time to learn a tool that's constantly changing. It's bad for business, really. So Keynote is the Mac version of PowerPoint, really a simplified PowerPoint version, which I'm all for, because you don't need features, that many features. I'll tell you a story. I almost starved to death when I first moved to the United States from Russia, because you go in Russia, there's a tiny store. It's very much like anywhere in Europe. It's a meat shop, it's a vegetable store. You know what you're buying, and when you go buy butter, there's one kind of butter, maybe two. So I'll go to a grocery store in the US, and there are 20 kinds of butter. I did not know how to choose. I literally would go to the grocery store and leave starving and not buying anything because I didn't know how. It took me, true story, it took me about a month before I was able to kind of like, okay, I can figure this out. So in the first month, I ate spaghetti with like plain tomato sauce, because I knew it's plain tomato sauce, right? And I settled on butter pecan ice cream for dessert. So spaghetti with sauce and butter pecan ice cream for a month, just because I couldn't make a choice. It's the same thing. You don't want to give people too many choices. You just want to solve the problem. And that's how you get light years ahead of any competition you've got there, because most people are not doing it.
Gotcha. Well, if you haven't been hungry before this show started, we had chocolate all the way to butter pecan ice cream. You should be hungry now. But the last question, and this is one of those shows that I don't get to take notes like I want to. So I'm going to have to go back and watch this again, because I think there's so many great ideas for everybody who's been watching this show that just can blow their minds about redoing some stuff that they haven't done before with repurposing. But where can they find you online, and what's the best, where are you on social? Where can they connect with you?
Well, obviously, trafficgenerationcafe.com would be the first stop. I'm actually creating a lot of content right now about content repurposing, because I understand that that's a skill that people don't have. And I do it in a very simple way, just like I needed to be told to me, very simply, how do I get from A to B without 10,000 words in between? So come visit me there. But also, I have mentioned the course that I'm creating, and it's actually about content repurposing. The bad news is that I'm still in the middle of it. It's taken me a little bit longer than expected, so it's not open to new students at the moment. But you can get on the waiting list. And the fun thing about that waiting list, I have a PDF that actually explains a lot of the steps that I just told you about. So it's always good to have some sort of, a follow-up that you can take with you and say, oh, that makes sense, right? So you can find that at contentboomerang.training. Content boomerang is what I call content repurposing, because it really is. You take a content, you throw it out there so that it comes back to you with traffic and sales, and that's a beautiful thing. I love that.
That's awesome.
Contentboomerang.training, and just put your email in there so that I can email you PDF, and then I'll let you know when it's open for future students.
Very, very cool. And we'll make sure to put all that in the show notes. And as always, we'd love for you to visit mainlypinteresttips.com and click on the sidebar and subscribe to our email community, so you'll never miss out from knowing when we have these great guests like we had with Ana today. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, because at Mainly Pinterest Tips, we're always adding testosterone one pin at a time. See you next time, everybody. Thanks for watching. See you guys. Thanks, Ana.
Thank you, Jeff.